Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Gavin adjusted the last picture frame on the living room wall and took a step back, observing it with a slight smile. The new house was finally starting to feel like home. Soft afternoon light spilled in through the big front windows, filtering through the curtains Elise had chosen so carefully. It felt calm, almost like a scene from a movie. But inside, Gavin felt the same emptiness as always, a silence that no new furniture could fill. Outside, the sound of a bicycle rolling along the sidewalk broke his train of thought. He glanced through the window and saw a boy about 10 years old, pedaling slowly, struggling to keep his balance while trying to make a sharp turn at the end of the street. He had messy brown hair and wore a faded Spider-Man t-shirt. On his way back, the boy stopped in front of their house, pretending to adjust the bike chain, though the curious look on his face made it clear he was watching the new neighbors. Gavin opened the door and leaned against the frame. "Everything okay there?" he asked in a casual tone. The boy looked up, a little shy. "Yeah, sir. It's just, my chain fell off. But I can fix it." Gavin stepped onto the sidewalk. "I can help if you want." The boy hesitated for a second, then gave a quick nod. Gavin crouched down, checked the chain, and with one precise move, put everything back in place. "There you go. Give it a try." The boy got on the bike, pedaled a few yards, and came back with a small smile. "It worked. Thanks. What's your name?" Gavin asked, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Miles. I live over there, the house with the blue fence." "Nice to meet you, Miles. I'm Gavin. I moved in here with my wife a few days ago." Miles looked at the new house curiously. "It's nice. Big, too. We wanted a quiet place, and it seems like we got one." Miles nodded again, but then he glanced at the digital watch on his wrist. "My dad called me for lunch. I'll come by later, if that's okay." Gavin smiled, shrugging lightly. "Anytime, kid." He watched Miles disappear down the sidewalk and went back inside with a strange but good feeling. A quick moment of connection. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. In the following days, the same scene kept happening. Sometimes Miles would drop by just to say hi, other times he'd bring some broken object, a toy flashlight, a car missing a wheel, even an old radio, always with the excuse that he wanted to see if it could be fixed. Gavin realized it wasn't about the objects, but the company. And, in a way, he needed that connection, too. One Saturday afternoon, Gavin was sanding a wooden board in the garage when he heard light footsteps. Miles showed up carrying a tiny toolbox and said, "Can I help?" Gavin got a kick out of that plastic box full of mismatched screws and a crooked screwdriver, but answered seriously, "Sure. Grab that sandpaper and see if you can smooth this part here." Miles got excited. They worked side by side for more than an hour, almost in total silence, except for the sound of sanding. Gavin demonstrated the motions calmly, and Miles tried to copy them with full concentration. Afterward, they sat on the garage steps with 2 cans of soda. "Do you have kids?" Miles asked suddenly. Gavin froze on the inside. No, I don't." "Oh, my dad says he's not having any more. He said God decided that." Gavin looked at him, surprised at the boy's maturity. "Your dad sounds like a wise man." Miles shrugged. "He's nice, but he's always tired. After the accident, he got kind of sad. But he tries." "And your mom?" Miles fiddled with the soda can tab. "She died when I was 6. Cancer. I don't remember much about her, just her laugh. She laughed a lot." Gavin stayed quiet. The afternoon sunlight slowly faded behind them, painting the sky orange. Without another word, he gave the boy a gentle pat on the back. That talk had changed something. Miles was no longer just a curious neighbor. Gavin was starting to see in him something he hadn't realized he still wanted to feel. It wasn't just friendship. It was affection. It was care. It was that kind of bond that grows slowly, and by the time you notice, it's already part of who you are. And as much as he tried to hide it, something in his chest started to warm up again. Maybe, just maybe, that neighborhood wasn't just a fresh start. Maybe it was where Gavin would rediscover a forgotten part of himself. That week, Gavin noticed Miles started showing up earlier and earlier. Sometimes he didn't even knock. He'd just lean on the gate and wait, hands in his pockets, eyes alert to see if Gavin noticed him. Gavin, in turn, pretended he didn't see, but made sure to step out to the garage or find something to do in the yard. There was a silent pride in realizing someone, even so young, was waiting for his company. One Sunday morning, Gavin was putting together a shelf for Elise's office when he heard a soft tapping on the window. He turned and saw Miles grinning mischievously, waving. Gavin motioned for him to come around, and seconds later the boy was already in the hallway. "Want to help?" Gavin asked without even thinking. Miles answered with an enthusiastic, "Sure," and ran over to where the boards were spread out on the floor. Gavin handed him an Allen wrench and showed him where to tighten. Miles had small hands, but he was focused and determined. The kind of kid who tried to get it right on the first go, even if he wasn't exactly sure how. "Did you learn this on your own?" Gavin asked, surprised at how easily the boy used the tools. "Sort of. Sometimes my dad taught me. But after the accident, he can't anymore." The casual way Miles talked about his dad always made Gavin thoughtful. Calvin almost never left the house next door, except to put out the trash or water the garden. He was a quiet man, eyes always watchful, expression serious. But over time, Gavin noticed that whenever Miles was with him, Calvin would discreetly come to the front window. Not out of distrust, but with a mix of watchfulness and gratitude. That afternoon, Gavin decided to take Miles to get ice cream on the corner. Elise was reorganizing boxes in the guest room and barely noticed when they left. As they walked down the sunny street, Miles rambled about school, about a classmate who dropped a tablet in the toilet, and about a science project involving potatoes and copper wires. Gavin laughed wholeheartedly. It was the kind of conversation he'd never really had, simple, light, full of raw energy. After the ice cream, they sat on a bench in a nearby park. It wasn't crowded, but a few families were around. A mother pushed a stroller with twins. A father played frisbee with his daughter. Gavin watched in silence. "Have you ever thought about being a dad?" Miles asked, licking the chocolate off his fingers. The question hit Gavin with a soft, unexpected punch. He took a moment to answer. "Yeah. A lot." Miles didn't say anything. He just nodded like someone who understood more than he should for his age. "I think you'd be a good dad." Gavin froze for a moment. "Why do you think that?" "Because you listen. And you don't yell. And you teach me stuff without acting like you just want to show off." Gavin looked away, his throat tightening. He pretended to wipe ice cream from the corner of his mouth, but really he was just trying to hide the lump in his throat. On the way back, they found Calvin on the porch. He was holding a thermos in his lap and a mug in his hand. Miles ran up to him, showing a little metal piece Gavin had given him, an old screw from a broken cabinet. "Dad, look. Mr. G said I can start my own toolbox." Calvin glanced at Gavin over his glasses. His eyes were hard to read, but there was something there, maybe respect. "Thank you," he said, simply. Gavin just nodded. That night, after dinner, Elise commented, "Miles is always around. You like having him here, don't you?" Gavin put his plate down in the sink and took a moment to answer. "Yeah, I do. He reminds me that I can still be useful to someone." Elise came up from behind and hugged him around the waist. "You've always been useful. But now you're letting someone see it." Gavin looked at their reflection in the window glass. He saw his face and, behind him, Elise's face resting on his shoulder. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was actually living, not just existing. And all because of a kid with a rusty bike and a huge heart. It was a cloudy Wednesday when Gavin got home from work early. The sky was overcast, and the wind swept dry leaves across the sidewalk. As he got out of the car, he noticed the back door of the house was slightly ajar. Strange. Elise never left doors open. She was careful about everything, locks, windows, even the porch lights. He pushed the door open with his fingertips and stepped inside, but nothing seemed out of place. He thought about asking her, but decided against it. Maybe she just got distracted. Then he tried to forget about it. But it was the next day when something really unsettling happened. Gavin was at work, focused on a cost spreadsheet, when his phone buzzed. It was a video call from Miles. That was odd. The kid almost never called, especially not during school hours. Gavin answered with a sense of urgency. "Miles? Everything okay?" The boy's face appeared, looking serious. He spoke quietly. "I think there's a man in your house." "What do you mean?" "I was outside playing soccer and saw someone go in through the back. He was wearing a cap and a backpack." "It wasn't you." Gavin froze for a few seconds. He tried to think of who it could be. A service worker? Some friend of Elisa's? But he couldn't recall anyone scheduled to come by that day. His heart started pounding. "Are you sure he went in?" he asked, trying to keep calm. "Positive. I know your place, right? I saw the door open and he went inside. I got scared he might be a thief." Gavin thanked the kid, ended the call, and instinctively texted Elise. "Nothing serious, just something like, everything okay at home?" She answered a few minutes later, vaguely, "Yes, everything's fine." "Why?" That unsettled him even more. Her response seemed distant. Like she was carefully choosing her words. That night, the unease had taken root in him like a growing seed. He couldn't relax. He tried to convince himself he was overreacting, that maybe it was some friend of hers, a family member, someone he just didn't know. But why use the back door? And why all the secrecy? He decided not to confront Elise right away. Instead, he went to an electronics store and bought a small surveillance camera. A simple model, discreet, easy to hide. He installed it himself in the living room, pointed at the hallway leading to the back door. He didn't tell anyone, not even Elise. Over the next few days, he acted like everything was normal. He talked with Elise over dinner, helped Miles with a science project in the yard, laughed at the boys' stories about a classmate who talked in his sleep and gave away the group's secrets. But at night, he watched the recordings alone in his office. On the third day, he saw something. The image was clear. At 2:27 p.m., a man entered through the back door. He wore a dark jacket, a cap, and a backpack, exactly as Miles had described. He moved confidently through the living room, looked around, and went straight upstairs without hesitating. Gavin paused the video right there. His blood ran cold. The image was a bit shaky from the recording system, but sharp enough. The man didn't look lost. He looked familiar with the place. As soon as he got home, he found Elise in the kitchen, chopping vegetables. He approached her slowly, trying to keep his voice steady. "Who's the man coming here during the day?" he asked, direct, not beating around the bush. Elise froze. The knife hovered in midair for one too long second. She didn't turn around. "What man?" "No need to lie, Elise. I installed a camera. I saw him." She set the knife down carefully on the cutting board and leaned on the counter. She turned slowly, her face pale and eyes wide. I was going to tell you. I swear. I just didn't know how. Gavin folded his arms, waiting. Who is he? He's my brother, Jacob. He got out of prison recently. He has nowhere to stay, Gavin. I thought you wouldn't understand. Gavin felt a throb in his head. You have a brother? And I'm just finding out now? We drifted apart years ago. He got into serious trouble. My dad cut ties with him. I did too, for a while. But he showed up asking for help. I didn't want to bring this into our lives. So I hid it. She was on the verge of tears, but there was something in her words that felt off. Something that scratched at Gavin's ears like a bad note. So why does he come in through the back door like he's hiding? She hesitated. He's ashamed. He didn't want to run into you and cause trouble. It was a convenient excuse. Very convenient. Gavin didn't say anything else that night. He just left the kitchen, went to the bedroom, and locked the door. Her words kept spinning in his head, over and over. He's my brother. He got out of prison. I just wanted to help. But deep down, something told him the truth was still far away. Gavin couldn't sleep that night. Even lying there next to Elise, his body still, his mind kept spinning in a loop of the same questions. If Jacob really was Elise's brother, why hadn't anyone ever mentioned him? Why did he act like an intruder? Why did it all feel made up? Early the next morning, before the sun was fully up, Gavin was in the kitchen making coffee. His hand shook a little around the mug. He decided he had to see this man with his own eyes. Look him in the face, pick up on anything, recognition, a clue, anything that would justify this phantom presence slipping in and out of the house, hiding more than just his face. Elise showed up looking like she hadn't slept either. He cut straight to the point. I want to meet him. She seemed startled. Jacob? Yeah. I want to talk to him. Today. Elise hesitated for several long seconds. Then she nodded slightly, like someone who had run out of ways to fight it. He can come by after lunch. I'll let him know. Gavin spent the rest of the morning tidying up the garage. Not because it needed it, but because he had to keep his hands busy to stop the thoughts from crushing him. Around 2 in the afternoon, he heard tentative footsteps in the yard. Elise appeared in the doorway with a man next to her. He was taller than Gavin, with an unshaven face, a black cap hiding part of his features, and a worn backpack slung over one shoulder. His baggy clothes seemed to cover a tired, worn-out body. When he took off the cap, he revealed dark, thick hair and dark eyes too. There was absolutely nothing about him that resembled Elise. Gavin forced himself to stay calm. He gave a firm handshake. The man, introduced by Elise as Jacob, responded with an awkward, almost automatic smile. Gavin invited him inside, and the three of them went to the living room. Elise stayed standing the whole time, restless, like any word could blow everything up. The conversation was off from the start. Gavin tried to be polite, but every question felt like it hit a wall. You grow up here in town? Kind of. We moved around a lot. What about your parents? Did you have a good relationship with them? Jacob scratched his neck. Not really. But, they're gone now, right? What bothered Gavin most was that he couldn't verify anything. Elisa's parents had died years ago in a car crash. He'd never met them. Old photos around the house only showed Elise alone or with her parents, never any other child, any other male face. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't recall Elise ever mentioning a Jacob, not a single story or memory, no photo, not even a random comment. At one point, Gavin excused himself, went to the bedroom, and grabbed Elisa's photo album. He flipped through it page by page. Childhood, birthdays, graduations, vacations with her parents. No sign of another kid or any man. It was like Jacob had just popped up out of nowhere. He returned to the living room, where Jacob and Elise were talking quietly. When they noticed him, they stopped suddenly. Elise forced a smile, but Gavin just watched. Everything about their body language was off. They didn't act like siblings. Gavin had a brother. He knew what real siblings looked like, that mix of affection and rivalry, those inside jokes, the easy way of communicating even after decades. Here, he just saw a stranger and a woman trying to seem comfortable with that stranger. "You said you did time, right?" Gavin asked bluntly. Jacob looked at Elise before answering. "Yeah." "For what?" A long pause. "Old stuff. Nothing big. Got busted with a stolen car." Gavin bit the inside of his cheek. "And why does getting out of prison mean you have to sneak into my house?" Jacob didn't reply. He just crossed his arms and looked away. Elise jumped in. "Gavin. I told him to do that. I figured you wouldn't understand. I was wrong, okay? But he hasn't done anything wrong." Gavin gave a humorless huff. "He came in 3 times, Elise. Without letting me know. That's not normal. That's trespassing." The conversation ended there. Jacob said he had to go and left quickly. Elise followed him out, then came back a few minutes later, her eyes red. Gavin didn't say a word. He just sat there, staring at the floor, lost in thought. That meeting only made him more suspicious. Instead of calming him, it brought more doubts. This wasn't a sibling relationship. It was something else, something with more to hide. And as much as he tried to trust her, his gut told him there was still a deeper truth behind it all. This time, he was determined to find it. Gavin couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. After that strange encounter with Elise's so-called brother, he became obsessed with figuring out what was really going on. It wasn't just about jealousy or distrust anymore. It was that gut feeling you get when the truth is knocking, but nobody wants to open the door. He decided to seek out someone who might know more than Elise was willing to share, Jenna, a childhood friend of Elise's, someone Gavin had only briefly chatted with at a party years ago. They arranged to meet at a discreet cafe downtown. Jenna arrived with a friendly smile, but her expression turned tense the moment Gavin said he needed to talk about Elise. "Jenna. I know this might sound strange, but, did Elise ever tell you she had a brother?" Gavin asked directly, gripping his coffee cup. Jenna frowned, confused. "A brother? Elise never had a brother, Gavin. She's an only child." A chill ran down his spine. "Are you sure?" "Positive. We grew up together, Gavin. I practically lived at her place when we were kids." He leaned forward, heart pounding. "So, if I said someone named Jacob showed up recently, claiming to be her brother, and he did time in prison?" Jenna's expression changed completely. She dropped her spoon into her cup with a clatter. "Jacob? Jacob Myers? I don't know his last name. All I know is he says he's her brother." Jenna shook her head in disbelief. "Gavin. Jacob was Elisa's ex-boyfriend. She was head over heels for him in high school. They dated for years. But he was trouble. He went to prison for stealing cars. The last I heard, he was serving time out of state." Gavin slowly pushed his chair back. The confirmation hit him like a blow to the stomach. There was no longer any doubt. Elise had lied. Every word, every tear of remorse, all layered over more lies. He left the cafe without finishing his coffee. The world outside looked different, as though it had changed color. He drove straight home. Elise was washing dishes, like nothing had happened. "We need to talk," he said, his voice flat. She dried her hands and turned, seeing the look on his face. There was no patience left. Jacob was never your brother. A heavy silence took over the room. Elise couldn't hold his gaze. Her breathing sped up. I know everything. I talked to Jenna. She told me who he really is. She covered her face with her hands, sobbing without saying anything. Her tears weren't of someone sorry for the lie. They were the tears of someone defeated by the truth. Gavin took a deep breath, steadying himself. You have 2 hours to pack your things. I want you out of this house today. She tried to speak, tried to explain between sobs, but Gavin raised a hand for silence. No. I've heard enough lies. You have 2 hours. Without raising his voice, he grabbed his car keys, walked out the front door, and headed down the street, leaving Elise in the middle of the living room, hugging herself. Time passed slowly. The hours dragged under the weight of a reality that had finally collapsed. Elise, her eyes swollen and hands trembling, started packing. Each piece of clothing she folded into a suitcase felt like another mistake. Each step through the hallway stirred memories that no longer belonged there. Gavin returned exactly 2 hours later. He opened the door to find an empty living room. The walls echoed in a dense silence. A sealed box on the table, a half-full glass of water, and the faint scent of Elisa's perfume were the only signs that she'd been there at all. She was gone. And she took every lie with her. The divorce went through in under 3 months. Elise didn't fight for anything. Didn't try to win him back. She just disappeared from Gavin's life. He heard through acquaintances that she'd gone to live with Jacob, no more disguises, no more lies. But at that point, Gavin barely cared. He was free. And more than that, he felt at peace. Over time, he started spending more time at Miles's place. His friendship with the boy and with Calvin grew naturally, steadily. Calvin, always so quiet, spoke more with his eyes than most people did with long speeches. And Miles, well, Miles was pure light. Smart, charismatic, full of life. In them, Gavin found what his heart had been craving, a new kind of love, without needing promises or blood ties. Just being there. One fall afternoon, while he was sipping tea on his porch, Gavin's phone buzzed. It was Jenna. Hey. You heard? Heard what? Elise. She did get back with Jacob, but he got arrested again. Theft this time. Didn't even last 6 months on the outside. Gavin stayed silent. What about her? He asked after a moment. She's on her own again. Seems she left town. He just thanked her for the call, hung up, and looked out at the quiet street. Miles was next door, playing with a paper airplane, and Calvin was watering the plants with a hose in one hand and a smile on his face. Gavin stood up without a word, walked over to the gate, and waved at the boy. Life went on. And so did he. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.